So we're here with Charles and Bill Hill.
Hi.
Let me get your blue tag. So
yeah.
I know you're. So where are we?
Well, we're just,
and what are we doing?
we're just outside Building 10 on the campus, and as you can see, it's a typical Seattle March day.
Yeah.
Not, but it's kind of been like this for the last few weeks. You know, we've had but almost no rain, and the temperature must be it's hitting the low 60s at the moment.
Yep. I'll do weird things with the camera
so
today.
it's pretty amazing. Yeah, so we're outside Building 10, which is where I work and where the type guys work. I know you've just been speaking to them, and
it's going to film. This is going to air on April 4th, right?
April 6th.
6th is our first year anniversary.
Yeah.
And you were our first interview on Channel 9.
Oh,
so
right.
That's why we figured, hey, let's go hiking with Bill Hill.
The wheel turns,
Yeah.
It's cool. Well, a lot's happened in the last year. You know, we've
let's take a walk. You know?
Yeah, as you've heard from those guys, we've completed the new Latin fonts and the Japanese font. Those guys all work for me. They've worked for me for some time, and they're very modest, but.
Point which way you want me to go. So.
Yeah, we'll go this way.
All right.
They're very modest, but those guys... I'm
going to do this whole hike backward, by the
way. In terms of type and in terms of reading on the screen, those guys are the best in the world at what they do. No question.
Yeah.
It's such a privilege to have a group of people like that working for you. It's just amazing. They never cease to amaze me. So we're heading down towards the big fountain.
And how long have you worked here at Microsoft?
I did my 10 years in January.
Okay.
Right. Congratulations.
So, yeah.
So you've seen this campus go from... Were you in the first buildings on this campus?
When I came to interview for my job, the group I was working in was working in Building 8. But by the time I actually got on my job, we were in Building... 24, I think, and then we've been all over the place. Building 24, Building 28.
Something here.
Been in Building 10. I've been in Building 43. You know, it tends to happen. You know, there's a lot of the company's been growing at such a rate. I mean, when I joined it, to me, Microsoft was a big company when I joined it. It had about 17,000 people working for it, maybe about 10 or 12,000 of them on campus. Mm-hmm. But now. I mean, it's 3 times that size, and the campus has grown to that length as well. You know, so there's all these new buildings, you know, over the other side of 156, and we've got Red West up there. But the great thing about it is it's still a beautiful place. I mean, look, we're walking down this path here. There's all this. This is salal, which is a native plant from the Pacific Northwest. The Native Americans from these parts used to gather the berries of it. They'd dry them and press them into cakes, and it was like a fruit pemmican. So that would keep you going in fruit over the winter. You know, so
we just have to show the noise.
Yeah.
So it's big. So this is all original campus, right?
Yeah, this is all original campus. These are some of the original buildings down here. Buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4 down there. They've been refurbished many times, and I think there are plans to rebuild them because we need to go a bit higher. You know, the more people we add, you know, the campus is expanding in area all the time, but it's also been expanding up the way.
Sorry, faked me out there.
And this is a Mahonia, known as an Oregon Great.
Can you eat?
Well, it's pretty bitter, but it actually works very well as a cure for diarrhea.
And how do you know this?
Well,
the secret knowledge of Bill Hill.
I spend a lot of time out in the woods. I spend a lot of time tracking animals. Just, you know, when you're out in the woods, at most times of the year there's something to eat. If you're, you know, even if you're not hunting, there's usually something to eat. So it's kind of knowing what those things are. I mean, all of that, the animal tracking, the wilderness skills and so on, and spending time out in the woods, that's actually been the biggest influence on my work. Because I've said this to you before, Robert, you know, we think we're so civilized. We've got all these cars and boats and planes and computers, but we're all Homo sapiens version 1.0, right? We're a hunter-gatherer That's how the perception system works, and that influences everything. It influences how we build user interface. It influences how we read, how we present text to people, etc., etc. Everything like that is all based off the fact that, hey, this is Homo sapiens version 1.0, and to understand how that hunter-gatherer works, you have to study it in its native environment, which is you spend time out in the woods.
Yep.
So there are plenty of places on campus where you can do that. I mean, we're just now down at the big pond that's known as Lake Bill,
Yep.
right? Because
Yeah, why is that? Why is that?
well, Lake Bill. Come on, this is Bill's place, really.
Sure. But was he around here at some point?
Well, yeah. I mean, these are the original buildings
Got it.
from Microsoft. Buildings 1, 2, 3, and 4 were here. This is Lake Bill, and it was a tradition, and still is done from time to time, where some of the executives will swim Lake Bill, for a bet or for a team that's performed, right? And it's pretty amazing. We're in the middle of Redmond. We've got ducks, we've got Canada geese here. There's some fish in there, and you get sometimes the most amazing wildlife things. There's some tables up there for the cafeteria in Building 4. So the guys from the group, Mike Duggan and Geraldine and so, they were all sitting up there one day looking at Lake Bill when suddenly an osprey just appeared, dived straight down into the water and flew away with a fish.
Wow.
And to have that kind of thing happen on campus is just amazing. We forget that. The Pacific Northwest hasn't been settled for a long time, and so there's all this wildlife here. I mean, another story, I was in Building 28 and we're walking out to lunch one day and I heard this incredible thump. And I wondered what it was. I couldn't see anything. And I heard it again. I looked out the window and there's a pileated woodpecker lying on the ground, right? He'd flown into one of the windows. The building was kind of U-shaped and he got himself stuck in there and he was flying against the window because it looked like the sky, right? So he'd hit this thing and he'd knocked himself out. So the group were all heading towards lunch and I said, wait a minute, and I kind of ran out. I picked up this pileated woodpecker, I pinned its wings to its side so it could injure itself. Pointed the beak the other way because these guys knock holes in pine trees. They could knock a fair hole in your, and then I started running for the nearest trees on the campus to kind of release him. And I got within about 20 feet of the tree, let it go, and he flew up and was perfect. A pileated woodpecker is a big bird of this size. Here's Bert Keeley. You should talk to Bert.
Hey, Bert! Look who you meet on campus.
Hey, we need to get together.
The tablet team meets the typography team, right?
What are you guys up to?
Oh, we're filming Bert doing a hike at campus.
So
Bill, I'm sorry.
next time you gotta ask him if you can come over and film him in his away office in Hawaii.
Oh. do you think Charles, do you think Lynn would expense that trip to go? Yeah.
Absolutely.
I want to see that.
That's essential.
Oh, yeah. Can you request
that's
that?
opportunity leave. We can expense it right now.
Yeah. You'll get this like $4,000 bill and go, what the heck?
It's the surfboard that they might cavil at,
Yeah.
Yeah, we got to catch up.
We got to catch up.
So, are you in town for?
I'm actually out for a couple of weeks from tomorrow.
Okay.
But when I get back, we should catch up, play some music, because I want to talk to you about. I think we should do.
Now, wait, you guys are
Trying
both.
to do an album. Yeah.
You guys are both musicians, right?
Yeah.
You're a guitarist.
Yeah, Bert's an even better guitarist. Bert is an awesome guitarist, way better than me.
We love playing together,
Yeah.
doing acoustic duos.
What kind of bands have you played with?
Have played with?
Yeah.
Just about, all sorts.
Name some.
Well, let's see. 3 weekends ago, it was Bobby Weir from the Grateful Dead, Country Joe McDonald, who opened up Woodstock, right, with the Fish Cheer. He has some new kind of anti-war songs that are really great, too. Let's see. T-Bone Burnett, who did the Oh Brother, Where Art Thou soundtrack and has produced tons and tons of stuff. Let's see. I mean, some of the guys in our
So
band
you're
are
fairly.
awesome.
What I was getting at, you're fairly accomplished.
We have
player.
fun. We have a blast.
Yeah.
Did a gig.
You're not just
last
like my
year
son learning.
Did a gig last year with Joan Osborne. Let's see who else. G.E. Smith. We play with him fairly often.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you told me one time you used your tablet PC to read lyrics off of, so you put it on the floor and you.
Yeah, fair number of people do that. I've actually used it as my guitar effects pedal too. Yeah, just stick it on the floor.
See, we gotta come and see you play. That sounds like another show line thing. We gotta go to Hawaii now, and we gotta go in here.
Right on, let's do a gig in Hawaii.
All right. Back on the
See you,
hike.
Bert.
Great.
Yeah, Bert's a great guy.
Hey.
And incredible guitar player. Way better than me. But I've got a 24-track recording studio, digital recording studio at home. So Bert comes out, and we just play.
That's cool.
We got some songs. We actually got a nice song.
Hey, there's a. He's checking us out.
Yeah, you better watch these ones. You don't walk backwards into one of them.
Yeah.
There's some of the fish that attracted the osprey. I don't know. I think it'd be a bit. Osprey could get away with even one of the big ones.
Yeah.
And we live out about 35 minutes from campus. A house we built on the Tolt River, and it's incredible. You know, I mean, here we are. We have this high-tech campus, but out of my house, it's like being completely out in the wilderness. I mean, one of the visitors to the front door. Out of the
You can
house,
tell I'm not going to get a job as the camera guy on the TV show. Right?
you know, I'm sitting in my studio one night playing, and my son Eldon pops his head round the door and says, "Dad, there's a cougar at the front door." And there was this 175-pound male cougar.
Wow.
Stood outside the glass front door, you know, kind of just looking in. And you know what? You know why he was there?
Why?
Because I'd been tracking him and his family the day before, up in the woods at the back of my house. I'd found out where they were denning. I'd poked around their home. Hey, and he was doing it. Well, you know where I live, so I'm coming to check out with you. He backtracked me. You know, because they do that. Cougars are, well, the big cats. They're just curious.
Now this is one of the newer buildings.
This is one of
right?
the new buildings. This is building 36.
Yep.
The office guys, Microsoft Office guys are in here. Let's head down towards building 31, 32.
Okay.
That's one of my favourite spots on campus.
All right.
If
I'm
you
going to
guys
get
have
behind
any
you.
time.
Go ahead.
The campus has expanded incredibly over the last 10 years. As the company has. The company's 3 times the size it was when I joined it. The campus is, it must be about 3 times the size it was when I came. And it's just amazing. But the great thing about it is somehow they've still managed to keep this kind of nice feel of the Northwest, and there's still some trees around, and there's still some secret areas that you can go to and you wouldn't even know you were on the Microsoft campus.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, there's an area of woods down there
Okay.
where I've tracked coyotes.
Really?
Yeah, because they swing through all the time. And with the trees, you know, you don't get pileated woodpeckers unless you've got a wood that's probably about 100 years old, thereabouts. They need to be enough standing snags for them to be able to peck in and get grubs and things like that, and also make their nesting holes. I mean, the way pileateds work. I'm sorry, this is turning into a bit of a nature.
Hey, that's cool.
The way that pileateds work, the male pileated actually digs 3 nesting holes or 4 nesting holes in trees, and then takes
Here, let me just get a shot of the mountains
They
across.
did. I had one do that inside of my house last year.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So the male pileated builds or digs about 4 nesting holes in various trees, and then brings his mate around to show them to her. You know, which one do you like, dear? You know, so they need a lot of standing snags to be able to nest. So so this is building 36.
Yep.
It's kind of
Sort of.
high-tech industrial look to
It
it,
looks
isn't
like
it?
they're like it's heavily fortified.
That would be office, yes.
Definitely fortified.
Fortress office, yes.
Wow.
Those guys, the office team and the Windows team, they never cease to amaze you. You know, to me, it's almost one of nature's miracles that we can ever actually manage to ship a version of Windows. You know, a software project that size with that many people. I think somebody was telling me yesterday. Jim Altrin said there are more people working on Windows now today than it took to send a man to the moon.
Wow.
And think about that.
And think of the computer power that we have that
Yeah, and
exists on your watch. Your watch has more computer power than sent a man to the moon.
And I remember that. I remember the first time I had the first laptop I ever got, and I realised it had more computing power than a Polaris nuclear submarine. And I was carrying this thing around. You know, it's kind of mind blowing the way that computer power has gone. I mean, I've got this guy sitting in here. You know, this is one of the new Pocket PCs from Dell, and it's got a 208 DPI screen, which means when you put ClearType on this thing, it is...
Our lens is right on top of this
Yeah.
thing.
So when you put ClearType on it, it's as readable as paper. So this is my library, right?
How many books do you have on there? You talked to us a year ago about the influence of reading on your life.
Yeah, well, about 1,200.
1,200?
Yeah, generally.
100 books.
Yeah. I mean, this guy here, you know, a 512 megabyte CF card will hold about 700 or 800 books. And I also happen to have one of these, of course, which is the 256 megabyte SD card in there as well, right?
Yeah.
So this
Which
will
is
hold...
also obsolete. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I had one of these about 5 years ago, and I realised that I could carry around every book that I would read for the next 5 years on a device, on a storage device the size of a postage stamp.
Yeah.
Right. And then being able to carry your library around like that with you all the time. You know, the batteries on this guy last for about 8 hours if I'm not using wireless. So there's my library. If I'm on a plane, if I'm stuck in a line at a cafeteria, if I have to wait for my car at the shop or anything like that, my library's right there. I just sit down and read.
Fantastic.
Now, where do you get all those books
Well,
to put on there? I mean, is there...
there's a lot of public domain books, you know. So I've read Moby Dick a couple of times, and you know, things like that. But more and more, we launched the Microsoft Reader. That was the team I joined when we were starting up the ebooks effort at Microsoft. We launched that product. We started the team in 1998. We launched the product in 2000. And since then we've seen the growth. There's maybe 20,000, 30,000 books that you can buy online now. So you just go on to some place like Amazon, and you buy the book and you download it there and then you've got it. I mean, I'm rereading the science fiction fantasy novel Lord Valentine's Castle by Robert Silverberg. Right, it's one I've read a few times, but I'm rereading it. This time I wanted to read it on this device. I went up to Amazon, I bought a copy of the book for less than $6. Downloaded it, had it there instantly. I have it with me all the time. I'm on, you know, I'm just reading my way through it. It's great. You know, so that's what's changed since we launched Reader and since the ebooks stuff. You know, we always knew it was going to take two things for ebooks to take off. That's why you haven't seen much success in the ebook world yet.
Okay, let's stop here.
There were two things it was going to require if ebooks were going to take off. One of them was devices. You know, so high quality reading devices. You know, the early devices like the Rocketbook and things like that, they really were not up to the quality you need for sustained reading. So we needed devices. And we also needed content. Now it takes years to get content. We're at a point now where there's enough content to read. You go on Amazon, you can order thousands of books. And devices, well, these guys have gotten better all the time. And so this latest one, with that screen resolution with ClearType, it's as readable, more readable than a paperback book. So that's where I do most of my reading now.
Why do you say it's more readable?
Because the resolution's actually better. I mean, if you take a paperback book, you know, by the time the ink kind of soaks into the paper and spreads out a bit, and so the real resolution of that page is probably about 120, 130 dots per inch. We're starting with 208 here, but then we've got ClearType, which gives us, you know, I don't know, 400 or 500 dots per inch equivalent, thereabouts. So we're better, and it's backlit, so I don't need, you know, I don't need a light on in bed. I've been experimenting. I have actually been reading in the bath with this. The screen gets condensation on it, which you have to wipe off every now and again. And luckily, so far, I haven't dropped it in the bath.
Exactly.
I'm still waiting for I'm waiting for Sony to come up with the Sportbook You know, it's
Yellow and
waterproof.
black.
Yeah, the yellow and black one is waterproof, like my sports CD player or MP3 player.
Well, I just want to stop here because this is Building 32, which is where the tablet PC team hangs
Building
out.
32 is in there. Building 31 is in there. I've been in there too. That's where the ebooks effort started with Building 31. Yeah, so now we're getting to the point where we have devices. Another thing that's happening in the ebook reading world, a phenomenon we're just seeing, is people reading books on cell phones.
Yeah.
Because cell phones are getting better screens now.
Yeah.
But the great thing about a cell phone is you can connect it anytime you want.
Yeah.
And think about the cell phone as a device you get your news on. You know, if you gave me a Microsoft smartphone with a screen that size, and I could just download books or news or whatever anytime I wanted. Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't have the 640 by 40 screen though.
Yeah.
It doesn't?
No.
No, this has got the
That screen is stunning, and when you see video on that screen, it's just really
fantastic.
it's beautiful.
Yeah, it's fabulous.
And that's Dell.
Dell. Well, Dell's got one, and HP also has.
Toshiba too.
Right.
Toshiba has the 48
So
640 display.
the manufacturer's getting into it. Actually, Dell has, for a few years, Dell's been leading the drive in resolution on PCs, particularly laptops. I think it was maybe 5-6 years ago I bought a Dell laptop that had 133 dots per inch. I've now got one that's 147. So it's 1920 by 1200 display.
Wow.
You put ClearType on there, it's absolutely gorgeous to read on. Great to watch videos on as well.
Did you see the research guys showing off at TechFest? Was it 16 screens? They had 16 high-res screens put into an array.
Wow.
They had 8,000 pixels across all the screens.
Well, that IBM display I've got in my office, that has 3840 by 2400.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's I still want one.
Well,
It's a year later. It's a year later. I still haven't talked to Glenn into buying me one of those yet.
Yeah, that's a display to kill for. Yeah, it's just beautiful.
Hey, you're coming up on some stairs. So.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea if you maybe watched where you were going.
All right. You guys weren't gonna let me fall over backwards, huh?
No.
I do some of
I'd
that
have to
stuff.
hold the camera.
Yeah. It's not as
All
easy as
messed
it
up.
looks.
It's not. I've tried it.
Hold on just a second. I'm gonna take a break. All right, we're back on here. So you were talking about how humans invented writing and reading. Can you tell us a little bit about that now that we're on a hiking trail?
Yeah, as I said before, I'm an animal tracker. I actually believe that the human race learned to read before we learned to write. It's kind of weird when you think about it, because what was written that we read? Oh, you know what was written? Animal Track was written.
Yeah.
We had to learn. You ever watched the movie Crocodile Dundee 2?
Yep.
Where he's in the park with the kids in New York and he's kind of drawing the tracks, you know?
Yep.
And he's writing. Native peoples teach their kids to track for survival. And there's two things they teach. One is to recognize the shape of the track, so you can identify the animal that's made it. But they teach them to read stories in the tracks. You know, I can walk through the woods. And my friend John Young, who taught me to track,
Hey, there's an animal running by.
you'd be walking along, you're looking at a coyote track,
Yep.
and you look down and you say, oh, he turned his head there. Because you can tell, you know, the different weight distribution when an animal actually turns its head.
Sure.
And you can tell whether an animal is feeling happy or not. Because, you know, long-legged animals like dogs and cats and deer, and I have to get down and demonstrate, right?
Yep.
Back legs and front legs are the same length. So when an animal's going at its kind of a normal, happy pace, the track of the back foot lands on top of the front foot track. The legs are the same length, right? So trackers call that harmonic gait. So if an animal's just kind of bopping along, doing its thing, feeling happy and relaxed, that'll be in its harmonic gait. If it's going slower than normal, then the prints of the back feet will be behind the front feet because it won't, you know, it's taking shorter steps, right?
Yep.
Sure.
If it's going faster than its harmonic gait, the front feet come beyond the back feet. until eventually the gait changes into this kind of galloping gait where, a dog, for example, is doing this. 2 feet, ba-boom. 2 feet, ba-boom. So you can tell by looking at these tracks what the animal's doing. Oh yeah, this wolf was walking along here. Hey, slow down. I wonder what was bugging him. Hey, he looked over to the right. Right? Yeah, he looked over to the right. Hey, and then he shot off. And I've been down in the Skycomish River. I've found a track like that, a wolf track like that. And then I went over to a nearby path, and at exactly the same time, there's a fisherman's track coming along. So what happened? You can tell the story. The wolf was bopping his way through the woods, just getting from A to B. Wolves are incredible. If you see a wolf track on a piece of flat ground, you could take a piece of string and stretch it for 100 yards, and that track will be perfectly straight, because this animal's got fantastic muscular balance. A male wolf will do about 30 miles in a night, so they waste no energy at all. They're just so perfectly... So it's like shooting an arrow. Domestic dogs do this, I'm sniffing here, I'm sniffing there, I'm out of weight, so my paws are turned out. You can look at a track and you can tell whether that animal's happy or apprehensive or stalking something. You can look at a track and say, hey, that's a female, because the back legs in a female are slightly wider than the back legs in a male, because of the pelvis width, so it can give birth. You can tell if that female is pregnant, because the back paws start to turn outwards like that, out the stomach swell, right? So you can be walking along here, you can tell the age of the animal, you can tell what it was doing, you can tell whether it's male, female, whether it was pregnant, how pregnant it is,
Now let me ask you this, what about the human animal?
Well, that's exactly the same. You can tell, yeah, you can tell from human tracks what humans are thinking. Well, roughly, whether they're kind of, stuff at the big heel dig in there. What if I'm doing this? I'm sneaking up something. You can tell the differences.
Totally. Or if you haven't slept for a couple days.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Can you tell a geek by his tracks?
That's a really good point. That'd be an interesting one to try. You'd need to get my friend John on this. My friend John Young taught me to track, and he's a way better tracker than I will ever be. Because he was taught by a guy called Tom Brown, and you may have heard of him. Yeah. He has a wilderness school and survival school in the kind of pine barrens in the northeast. He was taught by Tom. And John can take you on a walk through the woods, and he's just telling you stories the whole time. Like, we're walking along one day on a sandbar at the Skycomish, and John says, see the rabbit tracks? Now, rabbit tracks are really hard to spot. They don't make much of an impression, but they do have like this J-shaped set of sharp claw marks. So you can tell. I said, oh yeah, I see the rabbit track, John. I said, see where the owl nearly got him? And we look closer. And John gets me down on a hand. If you're a tracker, and you'll see that from my knees, see the brown legs, the white knees? Because you spend a lot of your time doing this. Right down at the track. And John has me down at that, and you can actually see the rabbits kind of just bopping along, and then the rabbit track explodes. Like, he just leaps away, and there's all the sand thrown off to one side. And then if you look really closely, you could see the imprints of the feathers of the owl wing. Wow. Where the owl had tried to hit him, missed, and just landed on the sand, left the impressions of its wings and flew away. Yeah. So,
what does this teach us about typography? That's
well, the first thing you have to realise is that we have, as humans, we have this visual perception system that was designed for survival in the wilderness. Yeah. So at the moment I've got 207 degrees of peripheral vision going, right? I have my ears, which can tell me to turn and listen to that bird over there, which is robin, right? And that gives me 360 degree coverage. So that's my, if you like, low resolution vision that's incredibly sensitive to movement. So one of the things that teaches you, for example, is pop-up ads are really annoying. Why? Because movement takes precedence over anything else in our response to visual stimuli. Because if you're a hunter-gatherer, movement is one of two things. A threat or your lunch. Right? So it's a priority zero interrupt in the human perception system. So animated stuff that's going on while you're trying to read is going to distract you from reading. Now, when you read, you don't use that 270 degrees of peripheral vision. You use foveal vision, which is driven by a high-resolution part of the human retina called the fovea. It's 0.2 of a millimetre across. It only has 1.5 degrees of arc. And as Kevin Larson was explaining, we fixate on a target of 5 to 7 characters wide, and then we jump to the next one. Now, the interesting thing is, that fovea, because it has 1.5 degrees of arc, tells you that readability for human beings starts about 9-point type, gets better at 10, better still at 11, drops off very slightly at 12, drops off beyond that even further. So 9 to 12 point, now a point being a typographer's measure is a 72nd of an inch. So 9 point is an eighth of an inch tall, that type. And 12 point is a sixth of an inch tall. So type that's between an eighth of an inch tall and a sixth of an inch tall is right for human beings for reading at normal reading distance. Right? And that's the study of the human perception system will tell you that. Mathematically you can work it all out, you see. So that's why this stuff, you know, the tracking by itself is important as well, because I had a great lesson one time. I was out on the Skycomish River with a friend of mine, Jen Jacobson, and we were tracking. We actually had it was a guy from the LA Times who wanted to come out and talk to us about tracking and how it related to our work, right? So we're walking along this path, and I said to Jen, "You seen any elk recently?" She said, "No, I haven't been around for ages." Weird things happen, by the way, when you start to track. I'd hesitate to call it extrasensory perception, but you use your senses in a much deeper way.
Sure.
Anyway, I said to Jen, have you seen any elk around? She said, "No, I haven't been any for ages," because we walk out onto the river and the first thing I see is an elk track. Now you can't miss an elk track. This elk is probably 700-800 pounds. Right. His hoof is this big, so he makes a hole in the sand this deep. Right, so Jen and I start off and we're following this elk track. Now we're running. We can make great progress because the tracks are really distinctive, okay? So we're running along. But then this elk hits an area of rock. Now, at that point, you're not getting these big deep holes in the ground. So what you do, here's how it works. I'll give you a little tracking tip. You can't really see the tracks clearly, so you come to the rock. So imagine this is the soft sand, and this is the last track in the soft sand here. Now I look back at the track before it, and I can see this animal's got a gait of about, say, 40 inches.
Okay.
Right, between tracks. So what I do is I put a popsicle stick in the last track that I can see. Now I know the next one's going to be about 40 inches away from that. So I start to look, and I might see a rock that's got a tiny little scrape on it, and a little bit of sand that's fallen out of his hoof here. So I'll put a popsicle stick in there, and then I'll get in my pocket and I'll get all the popsicle sticks out, and down on my hands and knees I'll start to measure the same distance, and I can look at an arc and see where he stepped next. What's interesting though is, to follow an animal like that over 100 feet and record every track can take me about an hour. So I've gone from being able to run along this track where the imprints were really distinctive to having to crawl along really slowly because they're blurred and indistinct. And you tell me, that applies to type, right? If I've rendered the type badly, I'm going to slow people down. They can't move through in the same way. If I've rendered it well, they can go through it quickly. Actually, they can go through at their harmonic gait, because human beings have a harmonic gait for reading, like animals have when they're walking. When we're reading our way through a page, we go at our own particular pace. That's dictated by the quality of our vision, how well the type is displayed, the complexity of the text that we're reading, how well it's laid out, our own level of literacy. So what a book is, it's like a flat sandy field. that lets each human run across it at their own pace. And what the science of typography is all about, I coined a term for how the science of type works. I called it osprey. Right? How this happened, how actually I had the whole revelation of how this worked was I was tracking a coyote through the woods at my home. And I suddenly realised I was reading a story. And then I realised that I was reading it by reading one track after another. I thought, that's serial pattern recognition. Oh, and then the light bulb went on. And I realised that the whole science of type and typography over hundreds of years has grown up to optimise serial pattern recognition. OSPR. I was out in the woods, I thought, oh, tag an EY in the end, call it Osprey. And I went back to my office, and it was one of those flash of inspiration moments. I went back to the office and wrote this 80-page paper called The Magic of Reading, that explained how reading works when we read print, why it doesn't work when we're reading on the screen, what we needed to do to fix it. So I wrote that paper and I sent it off to everybody, including Bill. And I heard back later that he'd read it 5 times. And then things began to happen all over Microsoft. Microsoft Office has a reading layout view in Word. They put it there in 2004. That's basically those Osprey principles applied to reading on screen in Word. And all the other things that we're doing kind of came from there too. So,
was this a Think Week paper that you did? Or?
No, it wasn't.
No.
It was just one of the flashes of inspiration. I had to get it done, and actually at the time, see, what happened when I joined the Electronic Books Group, the reason I joined it was fixing reading on the screen was core to their mission. If they didn't do that, and I said to Dick Brass when I came to interview for the job, Dick Brass was Vice President of Electronic Books. At that time, Vice President of 3 people, including himself. We're just staffing up, right? We're just starting it. And I said to Dick, look Dick, it doesn't matter how small an electronic book device is, how long the battery runs for, all that stuff, how cheap and quick and easy books are to download. I said, what really matters, where the rubber meets the road, is when somebody picks it up and tries to read a book. We all know that experience that we have when we do that. You know, the book, this physical book thing just disappears, right? And the real book's going on inside our head. I said, if we can do that, Dick, with an electronic device, then electronic books have a future, and if we can't, we may as well give up and go home. So Dick said to me, okay, your job is readability research, you go figure out how we do it, which is what I wanted. And it was in thinking about that, I mean, what I did was, in the next, I think, month, I read 12,000 pages of books, magazines, research articles, journals, read everything I could. It was like, you know, just jamming data into your brain. And then you start to think about it, and the place you go and think about it is out here in the woods. So I'm in the woods at home, and you know, I've got all this data going on in my head, and I'm reading this coyote track, and then suddenly some of the bits that I've taken in stick together, they congeal, and that's when the idea pops out. And well, at that point, you know, you've all this data in here, and it's just a question of can you type fast enough to get it all down. And that's kind of what happened. So all of this has an incredible amount to do with reading and with reading on the screen.
Okay.
Yeah?
Let me change tapes here because we're almost out. So you just were talking about something.
Yeah, I was asking about the development of typography, the engineering of typography.
Well, the cool thing about it is Johannes Gutenberg, who was the guy who really started this whole thing going 550 years ago, he described typography as art and science.
Huh.
And that's what it is. It's where those two, it's the interface between art and science. And that's really what I mean, Mike and Geraldine that you were talking to back there, they're typographers. You know, Geraldine's got a design degree, for example, and her background is calligraphy. Mike again is a typographer. They come from a design background, and then they've had to learn the software skills to do what they need to do, because on a computer, a letter, you know, is described by an outline, which is a mathematical equation created by a set of control points. In the PostScript world, those are Bezier splines, and in the TrueType world, those are quadratic splines. And the hinting that they have to do is about programming. So they've had to learn how to program. So these are designers, artists.
Sure.
calligraphers, typographers who've had to learn the program. And there are other people on the team who are much more purely SDE type guys.
Yeah. You met one of them.
Yeah,
you met his name, the blonde guy.
Greg Hitchcock.
Okay.
Yeah. So Greg Hitchcock, for example, these are guys who work on things like rasterizer technology. Now, what a rasterizer is you have that outline, but you have to fill it with dots. Rasterization is the process of filling it with dots, and it's really complicated because the dots are all different sizes depending on the resolution of the screen, and you have to decide. One of the things that happens is you've got this pretty coarse pixel grid on a screen, right? And the problem you've got is if you take an outline of a font, which is a mathematical equation, it can fall in different places on that grid. And you can only use the pixels on that grid. So you might have a part of the outline of an O, for example, that passes through a pixel. Should that pixel be on or off? And you have to make those kinds of decisions. And you get all kinds of rounding errors. Mike was talking, for example, about the lowercase letter m. And you've only got six pixels to display it. Well, in a lowercase letter m, you want each of the stems to be the same weight, right? The problem is that you take this mathematical equation, you throw it at a fixed raster grid, and some of the pixels are part in, some of them part out, so you get rounding errors. Some of them round up, some of them round down. So typically what you can get if you don't do hinting is you can get a lowercase m with one stem that's 2 pixels wide and the other 2 stems that are only 1 wide. Well, that's bad. So what hinting does, for example, is lets you normalize those stems. You lock those stems so that they all stay 1 pixel and will only change to 2 when they can all change to 2 pixels. And those are the kinds of things that hinting does.
So where does why the term hinting? Can you elaborate on that?
Well,
hinting
it's really telling the rasterizer what to do.
It's giving a hint of what it needs
to do in a particular situation. And there's that whole hierarchy of hints. They go all the way from like global hints that do things like normalise the stem weights, right? But there's also, if you've got a typeface, say Palatino, you'll have 4 weights of it. You'll have a regular weight or a Roman weight. You'll have an italic, the slanted. You'll have a bold, and you'll have a bold italic. Now, the bold needs to be bolder than the regular, right? But your problem is down at those reading sizes, you've only got 1 pixel to 2 pixels. So the bold, the 1 pixel stem you have to reserve for the regular weight, and it's too light and thin and spidery. You have to use 2 for the bold, or at least you had to in the monochrome world. ClearType, we don't have to do that anymore, because really...
What do you do in ClearType?
Well, in print, for example, in print, the bold might only be 33% or 50% heavier than the regular weight. And the computer, it's a huge jump, because you've only got these 1 pixel increments, right? So it goes from 1 pixel to 2 pixels, is a 100% increase in weight. With ClearType, what we can do, the 1 pixel weight, by the way, is too light and thin and spidery for reading text on the screen. But you can't go to 2 because that's too heavy for normal reading sizes. What ClearType let us do is say 1 1/3 pixels wide stems, and the bold can be 1 2/3 or it can be 2. So it's not a 50% jump. It's given us this whole subtlety that we didn't have.
And is that because of the quadratic?
No, this is because of the fact that we're using the red, green, and blue subpixels instead of the whole pixels. In the past, in the monochrome world, we rendered everything at whole pixel sizes, so you were stuck with 1 pixel increments, and there was no subtlety in between them.
Sure. Okay.
And that's really important at the text sizes that people need to read. Remember, I was talking earlier on, 9, 10, 11, and 12 point are the reading sizes. Well, down at those weights, you can only use 1 pixel in monochrome world, and it's too light and thin and spidery. So ClearType, but one of the first reactions that people had when we first showed them ClearType, we showed them ClearType, before and after, the monochrome rendered and the ClearType, and they said, well, you just made it bold. No, we haven't. We haven't made it 100% bolder. We've made it slightly bolder, which is the true weight that it should be. But we didn't have the subtlety to do it on the screen before. So that's kind of how that works. So these programs go all the way from defining the relationships between regular and bold, so a kind of a global constraint, all the way down to you'll have an instruction that says in Times New Roman, at 10-point type on a 100 dpi screen on a lowercase a, turn this pixel on. And it can make all the difference between a letter A that you can really see and one that's kind of mushy. Those are called delta hints, and those are the ones you want to do least because they're so specific. You know, you want to bubble these things up in the hierarchy as much as possible and have as many high-level hierarchical instructions as you can, and you leave those ones for the kind of the desperate cases that you can't solve in any other way than to go in and tinker with the individual pixel. That's what those guys do for a living.
It's amazing.
You know,
So it's incredibly complex.
yeah,
engineering.
and so there are guys who sit down there and write programs that turn on a single pixel in a lowercase a, you know, and but the thing is, it needs a typographer's eye to tell you whether it's right or not, or at least it has done up until now. We've got some technology on the go that may change some of that. But in the past, it's always been this really manual process. I mean,
And you learned typography on the printing press, right? You used to
my
work on
background
newspaper.
is printing. Yeah, I was a newspaperman back in Scotland for 18 years, and how I got into computers was in the early 80s. I could tell that they were going to change the printing industry forever, and it's like you see this big wave coming towards you. You've got two options: you can either drown or learn to surf. And I thought, I'm going to learn about computers, and then at least I'll know what's going on when all this starts to happen. So I started to get interested, and I started to study, and then I got kind of more technical. Then I ended up writing articles on computers and so on, and on software and reviewing software. And then a company came to me and asked me to write the documentation, the user manual for their software. And then in the mid-80s, 1984, I heard about, through some contacts, I heard about what was going on with this new technology of desktop publishing. Well, clearly that was going to change everything. Right. And that's how I ended up helping to form the European operations for Aldous Corporation, who launched PageMaker, which was the market leader in desktop publishing in those first few years. And they were based here in Seattle. So I used to travel backward and forward between Edinburgh and Seattle, maybe about 3-4 times a year. So that's how I got sucked from newspapers into computers. And then, at one point, Microsoft approached me right out of the blue and said, "We've got a job in Redmond we think you should be doing. Can you give us a call?" What was really interesting about it was in 1991 or 2, I can't remember, I'm sat at my desk in Aldous. I've just installed Windows 3.1. And I look at the type on the screen and say, wow, this is incredible. These guys have gone way beyond what I've seen on my Macintosh. Now I've been mostly using Macintoshes up till then. So these guys have gone way beyond what I've ever seen on a screen before.
What was it about the type that caught your eye?
It was so sharp, so clear, and so easy to read on the screen. This was Times New Roman, Arial, and Courier, the core fonts for Windows 3.1. When I got offered the job at Microsoft, it was to manage the guys who had done that. So, like 1992, I noticed it so much, I called my boss over and said, take a look at this. Take a look at the screen quality. And then in 1994, I was approached by Microsoft, and it was to run the group that had done that. What a blast! What an amazing blast! So Mike and Geraldine were part, and Greg Hitchcock, they were all part of that Windows 3.1 core fonts work.
Now, is there a new Bill Hill out there in the world somewhere that's going to see Longhorn and have that same revelation?
I hope so. I mean, in Longhorn we're going to see type of a quality you have not seen before on the screen. We've got the sub-pixel rendering is in there. We've got the new clear type fonts that we've created specifically for it. We've got the new Japanese we built. It's the first time anybody's ever done a Japanese typeface to read on the screen. Japanese are Homo sapiens version 1.0 as well. Their fovea is the same size as ours. They read 10.5 and 11-point type. Now, if you think it's hard doing a lowercase letter M at 9-point or 10-point, try doing Utsu, which has 8 horizontal strokes. If you have 8 horizontal strokes, you need 15 pixels to show them all, right? 8 blacks and 7 whites between them. But at 10-point, you maybe only have 9 or 14 or whatever. So what do you do there? Well, the solution in the past was they embedded bitmaps. You have to do stroke reduction. You can't show all the strokes. The only person who can decide which strokes you can leave out is a Japanese typographer, an expert. So somebody had to go through and say, well, we can take these strokes out here. So Mintro and Gothic, for example, that ship in Windows today, they have an embedded bitmap for every character at every size from 7 to 22 point. 400,000 embedded bitmaps. What that means is if you're producing a Japanese font, it's going to take you 50 man-years. Or it used to, because you had to do all these bitmaps. So what we did with the Japanese font, we went to Bill and we said, look, we think we can produce a screen-readable Japanese. We think we can do it in 18 months with the people we have. We're going to need to spend a little bit of money on it. At first Bill said, no, I don't think we should spend the money on this just now. And I said, oh yeah, we should, and here's why. And he pushed back again and said, no, we shouldn't. No, I don't think so. I'm really not sure what it is. Yeah, we shouldn't, here's why. He said, okay, we'll have to have a meeting. So we had a meeting, we had a review. We went in front of Bill, we got the money, and then 18 months later we showed him the Japanese. Now what we've done with the Japanese, it doesn't have any embedded bitmaps in it. What we did was we developed a new model of hinting to do the stroke reduction. So there's no embedded bitmap, so it's fully scalable to any size you want. You know.
Beautiful.
There are no embedded bitmaps, so it ends up being smaller. It ends up being clearer and crisper because we designed the outlines specifically to work with ClearType. So we end up with the most screen-readable Japanese that anybody's ever seen. Another problem with Japanese is, you know, you've seen those web pages that have got Japanese and English on them. And they look so unmatched. The English looks horrible along with the Japanese. That's because the English characters have never been harmonised with the Japanese. So what we did, it's an amazing project actually, to do Mario. We worked with a Japanese typographer and type designer called Eiichi Kono, who we've worked with for years. We worked with a Japanese company called C&G who did the outline work. We brought in Matthew Carter, who did the Verdana with us way back in 1995. And we redesigned the Latin so that it matched the Japanese and was harmonised, and all the baselines were harmonised, things like that. So you're going to see the best. The Japanese are just going to go ape. We've had incredible feedback from people at the Japanese government, for example, looking at this. No one will ever have seen Japanese of this quality on screen. Fantastic. And of course, we're going to apply the same things to Chinese and Korean and all of these other languages. And that was the real purpose of going to Bill and getting this money. We wanted to fix the problems of East Asian fonts because there's not much typographic choice. There's plenty of choice in print in Japan, for example, but there's not very much choice in terms of reading from the screen because nobody really believed there were major improvements that could be made until screens got to 300 and 600 dpi. Well, we've figured out how to do it now. And
you're doing the same thing for Russian too, right? You just won a big award for
the designers. What we did when we did the Latin fonts, when we do Latin fonts, we call them Latin, but they really have a much bigger character set. You know, old fonts used to have 256 characters, right? We're doing maybe 1,000 glyphs. So in the Latin, they'll also
What's a glyph?
A glyph is a character.
Okay.
Except, we get very technical about this. The glyph is the actual drawing that's used for the character. We use character to mean the Unicode character code, right? So they're not the same because, for example, you can have alternate forms of a glyph. You know, there's one font that one guy made which is 25 different ampersands, you know, for the and, right? Now each of those has the same Unicode character point, right? So how to tell which one to pick? So you need a glyph index as well. So we talk about glyphs. There may be alternate glyphs. If you're doing Arabic, for example, you have the same character code for a particular letter, but the glyph that you use depends on whether that letter appears at the beginning of a word, the middle of a word, or at the end of a word. You know, so you have many glyphs for the same character code. That's what OpenType is all about. We designed OpenType way back because of this very problem, that you needed to introduce glyph indexing into the system, that the character codes of Unicode would only give me a particular letter, but it wouldn't give you variants of it, you know. So you've got things like ligatures and all the rest of it, where you take two letters that come together and you pick. You know, if you get an S and T that come together and you want the archaic ST ligature, then you go away and you pick a different glyph. The substitution for the S and the T. So that's what OpenType was all about. we can go on forever about type. I mean, it's
Well, maybe we should get back to the hike.
yeah. I mean, people. Yeah, we should get back.
We
to
could
the
get back
sun
out
at
of the
least.
sun. You know?
No, we're sitting here in the shade.
I mean, you could just go on forever. But look, people have been doing writing systems for 5,500 years. They've been doing typography for 550 years. We've learned a huge amount about it. We've been doing it on the computer for maybe 30 years or thereabouts. High quality we've probably been doing for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And
we're
but even in that 20 years, we've learned a huge amount.
Sorry.
So there's an incredible amount of technology that's required to create the letters that you see on screen. Look, skunk cabbages.
Nice.
Right?
I thought I was smelling something.
Yeah, they smell pretty strong. I love these beautiful
The flowers? Yeah, they're gorgeous.
Bears like these. The bears up near us eat them occasionally. They were actually a famine food for the local native peoples.
Oh, really?
They're not very nice, but if you're starving, you can live on it.
They
You
won't
know, it's like
kill you.
Crocodile Dundee, you can live on it, but it doesn't taste very good.
Yeah.
This is really nice, though, Brooks.
Yeah.
Since we're moving again and living in a 3D world, we're just about to enter a 3D world, aren't we, with Avalon and other technology?
Oh yeah, yeah.
How does type change in a 3D world?
And that's a real good question. And we've done a lot of thinking about this. And I haven't really come up with any answers as to how it changes. I mean, there are some things that change. I mean, you'll render animation, you type in animation and so on in a 3D world. But in terms of reading, it so happens that we kind of read on a plane anyway. It's a 2D plane. If you look at print now, we've always read, there is really not a 3D aspect to that.
Right.
Although there are subtle 3D things you can do. I mean, there are 3D things that you could do to maybe throw the type up into relief, for example, a little bit. So there's some things like that that maybe will be very interesting to experiment with it. Once 3D, good 3D rendering, fast 3D rendering is part of the system, it'll be good to do some experiments with things like that and see where it's going. I haven't really figured out very much yet.
Yeah.
This is my favourite, one of my favourite areas on the campus is this duck pond. It used to be a timber mill there, and this used to be the mill pond and a mill race.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and when we were building that building up there, which I think is building
30
or 32, they had to do a wetland mitigation for it. So they had to create. There's the old mill pond right there.
Okay.
And they used some of the old stumps and so on, and so you've got this, you're in the middle.
When you see type, by the way, when you look at what some designer has done, do you like uppercase fonts?
What font is that, anyway?
I'm not quite sure, but it looks a bit like Palatino. This is okay for headings.
Okay.
You wouldn't want to read for a long period in all uppercase type. It's very wearing.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't give us a word shape we easily recognise. One thing that one of the disadvantages of working with type is you can't read anything without proofreading it or spotting the typographic things that you don't like. Like, for example, I'm looking at that W and that E, and I'm saying, they should really have done a better job of kerning those two together. There's too much optical space between that W and the E. I can't miss it. It's just not. Mike and Geraldine are exactly the same. So is Greg. Anybody who works with type, you see the mistakes. I was an editor for 18 years, right? I can't read a piece of text without spotting the typos or the misspellings or anything like that in it. It's just, you can't help noticing it.
Yeah.
Well, by and large, it's very good, but you always see these little details, like that one, like the kerning one, for example. That I really don't like that very much. I mean, your average Joe citizen will never even spot it.
No.
The interesting thing? It's like art. You may not know about art, but you know what you like.
Yeah.
If I deliver badly set type to you, to your eye, you'll know it.
Yeah.
You won't like it. You won't know why you don't like it. That's our job. Our job is to figure out why you don't like it, and how to deliver type to you in a way that you like best, that you're comfortable with. As Greg was saying earlier on, if we're doing our job right, you will never even notice.
Yep.
You should not notice the type. unless you're a specialist and it's your job to notice it. But the ordinary person reading should just be able to read the content and never notice the type.
Yeah.
Never be bothered by the type.
Just get out of the way. Yep. So, and that's another piece. You know, back to how the human perception system works. You know, we want humans to be able to reach their own harmonic gait and just be at ease
Yeah.
running through these pages of text. You know, we don't want them to be stumbling, trying to recognise the next character and stuff like that slows them down. They shouldn't even be noticing it. They should be going from A to B.
Is black type on white background the easiest to read?
Largely it is, yes. You've got to be careful. Maximum contrast is good. Black type on a white background is easiest to read. Some people have a problem with that. You know, I mean, everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
There are people who need white type on a black background because they have problems with the glare from a page, because just the visual difficulties that they have. You've got to think about these things too. But black type on white paper, actually not really white paper. Really white papers, you know, blindingly white paper is a bad thing, right? So, paper needs to be slightly off-white,
Yeah.
not true white, because you just get too much glare. Now, I'm looking at your T-shirt in the sun here,
Yeah.
and you know,
There.
if I was reading type off a page that was as white as that,
Yeah.
it would be very wearing.
Let me see if I can. There you go.
So black on white, but not completely white, right? That's probably the best for most people. Of course, then you've got to watch things like colour in type. You know, 40% of the male population has a red-green colour deficiency of one sort or another.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
what does that mean?
Male.
that's a genetic thing, right?
40%.
Yeah, 40%.
Can't see what colors?
No, they have a red-green colour deficiency of one sort.
Okay.
For some of them, it will be full colour blindness, so if you put red type on a green background, they wouldn't even be able to distinguish between them. That's very rare, but different levels of it. You know what's really interesting? You know, when you look at the light coming from a computer screen,
Yep.
and this was one of the key factors in figuring out how to make ClearType work. 60% of that light, you know, so you've got red, green and blue subpixels, right? 60% of the light that you see is coming from the green. 30% from the red and only 10% from the blue. It so happens that human vision is much more sensitive to different levels of green than any other colour. Why is that? Homo sapiens version 1.0.
Yep.
Look at all the different shades of green you can see out here, and that we have to differentiate between them.
Yep.
So we're back to that whole thing about, you know, what does this have to do with type or showing stuff on computer screens? It has everything in the world to do with it, because we're all humans and we all came from that background. We can see many more different shades of green than shades of blue or shades of red.
Let's get away from the street.
Yeah.
I mean,
I like the sun feels good.
Charles is all about the sun.
It's nice. I think I'm going to stay in Seattle for a while.
Yeah.
It's always like this here.
Oh, yeah.
It's a really well kept secret, right? We just don't tell people.
This is a recruiting video.
So all
The sun
rays
comes out
of
10 days a year, and this is one of the 10 days. And
Absolutely.
Well,
when
actually,
you buy your house.
yeah, well, actually, this last year it's been like this for the last 6 or 7
We
weeks.
haven't had a
pretty
winter.
much.
What do you feel? How do
No,
you feel about that?
Well,
What do you think's going on?
I don't mind. You see, I come from Scotland. We voted for global warming, right? Now, this is a skimmia. Smells really nice.
How do you spell that?
Skimmia. Skimmmia.
really nice.
Smells beautiful. I'm married to an artist and a gardener, and so I've learned a lot of this stuff. But that's not a native plant from here. It's amalgamated. Come on down and have a look at the pond down here. This is one of my favourite spots.
I've never even been. This is all Microsoft campus?
Yeah. Look.
Yeah.
This.
Building.
It doesn't
Building 30.
get much closer than that.
Yeah.
But the cool thing, so this is the old mill pond right here. Now what's really cool,
Here, let's.
Nice.
So this is Stevens Mill. Okay.
Wow. Cool.
History, I love it.
All right, try to walk down here backwards, Robert. Yeah.
I'm not walking down here.
Oh, this is nice. Now,
What? Just there, where if you get down on your hands and knees like a coyote, you can crawl through the bottom there, and you get into the woods back in there where nobody can see you, nobody even knows you're there, and that's sometimes I go there to think, you know. You can climb over the fence a bit further over. There's a whole kind of secret spot in there that nobody ever gets to because there's blackberries in the way. Quite often I go back to the office and I'm bleeding. Oh, Bill's been out on a think day again.
Nice.
That's where a lot of my thinking gets done in places like this, because I keep coming back to this thing about human perception. The only place you can really understand it is the place it developed, which was out here in the woods, or in the jungles, or in the forests. And if you want to really understand how human beings work, you don't study them in a lab. You study them out here. We've got a helicopter out there, huh?
Somewhere up there. Nice blue sky.
wow, I can't believe how incredible this is. Man,
We arranged a great day for Bill. It was raining yesterday.
Sky. Beautiful.
So, where are we going to go next?
Well, I think we should
Let's
head
go
back
say hi
up.
to Bill. The other Bill.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to turn off for right now.
Yeah.
So we're back. We're back on the final part of the tour. Bill's office is over there. We were just talking about reading, and what kind... Are you working with any of the UI guys on Longhorn? Or
Yeah, we are. User interface for reading is really interesting. It's a really interesting challenge because the ideal user interface when you're reading is you don't want to see any of the computer interface. Everything when you're reading, everything on that screen that isn't either white space or text is extraneous. It's a distraction. So when you're reading something, you want all the window chrome to go away. You don't want to see any menu bars or taskbars or scroll bars. Scrolling's about the worst thing you can do to somebody who's trying to read.
let's stop here.
Yeah. Scrolling's about the worst thing you can do to somebody who's trying to read.
Why is that?
Because we don't work that way. Again, Homo sapiens 1.0, right? We recognise we have a field of recognition. It's about this size.
Here. Yep.
And our eye travels across that, and then we like to change it. You don't. In real life, things don't scroll.
I tell you what, I like scrolling better.
Just because you've gotten used to it.
Partly, but also because of the web. And a lot of web pages try to force you to go from one page to the next without letting you scroll to the next page. And they're trying to do that to minimize scrolling and also increase ad revenue, right? So they pop up a new ad.
Well, it's not about. For me, it's not about reading. It's not about increasing ad revenue. Scrolling is actually less efficient, less comfortable for human beings to read. There's research that shows that.
Really?
Yeah, you've just gotten used to it, but probably your retention isn't as good or something of that sort. Look, typographers and designers have spent hundreds of years developing the optimum combination of line length, leading, page size, margins, etc. to prevent a phenomenon that actually has a name. It's called doubling, or reading the same line twice. You don't want to read the same line twice. When you read scroll text, you always end up reading some of the lines twice just to find out where you are. It's a bad thing. Now, like you say, it can be abused by people who say, well, if I turn a page, I can stick an ad in every page if you want.
Yeah. Well, it's the delay of seeing new text that recalibrating on a new line of text is faster for me than flipping to a whole new page and having to recalibrate and wait for that page to load.
Well, not if it's done properly. Not if it's done on a system that doesn't have those. You're absolutely right. You don't want a delay in rendering. Page turns should be quick.
Yeah, and they're not on the web. No. Loading a new page up takes 2 seconds.
And these are things that you that have to change. But you don't throw away the baby because the bathwater's dirty, right?
Yeah.
the fact is that paging is much better than scrolling.
Well, I do find that I like reading on the tablet better because it requires less scrolling because I'm in the vertical. I can see a whole page of text rather than half a page of text.
Yeah, well, you take that one stage further. What's really at issue is having the rendering technologies and the bandwidth and so on to take away the latency of page turns. That's really what's most important. And then I think you find that paging was much better than scrolling.
Anyways, I wanted to take you over here because this is the famous flagpoles. And over here at this side, whenever there's a major product ready to be shipped, they put a clock out here telling you how many days are left to ship. So we haven't started the Longhorn clock yet, which is
no, we haven't.
When we see that clock come up, then we'll know that it's getting closer.
Yeah, well.
What do you know anything about the logo type where the Microsoft logo?
Oh yeah, this is Franklin Gothic.
It is,
and it was a specially kerned version of Franklin Gothic that was adapted for the Microsoft corporate logo.
Oh, there's some nice cars on campus, huh?
Yeah. A big old Cobra.
Yeah.
I always wanted one of those. You're about 3 miles to the gallon, though, I think, if you're lucky. Now, this was Franklin Gothic. Yeah. If you remember the old logo, the one before this, it had like the AT&T kind of lines through it, through the O. Right, and then it was replaced with this. This was a version of Franklin Gothic that was...
Do you know who designed this?
Who designed it? No, I don't.
Okay. We should find that out someday. Get the story. Because I hear they came up with the cut in the O there. That's why it's not quite Franklin Gothic.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for taking us on a tour. I guess we'll stop here at the flagpoles.
Great.
And thank you.
This was a pleasure, Robert. And
this was awesome. So thank you very much, and thanks for celebrating our first year with us.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye. We're here with the type group. Just happened upon them in the hall here. So, who are you guys?
Oh, my name is Greg Hitchcock. I work on the ClearType team, doing brand new fonts for Longhorn and Office and new technologies to make screen reading easier. That's a big challenge for us.
Wow. And
I'm a poet. I'm a dev on the team.
Okay. So you build the ClearType technology as well, or?
Correct.
Okay. And
I'm Geraldine Wade.
look at me. No, look at me. Forget the cameras here.
I'm Geraldine Wade, and I'm a program manager on the ClearType team, and I manage the fonts that have gone into Longhorn, or going into Longhorn Office.
Wow. So you're the font lady, right? Forever known as the
She's
font lady.
also a designer, though. She can design fonts as well.
Yeah. And so what role did you play with the new, because there's 5 or 6 new
seven
Longhorn
fonts. 7 fonts altogether. I managed the project. I was the project lead.
Wow. So do you hire typographers then around the world?
Yes, we do. We're because of our background in design, we have good contacts in the design community, and we built up a virtual team that would help us make these fonts. It was really great to work with them.
Very cool. And do we know some of the names who?
Yeah, John Hudson and Lucas de Groot, Jelle Bosma, and Jeremy Tankard, Gary Munch, and the non-Latin consultants were Maxime Zukov and Jerry Leonidas.
Okay.
And we're continuing to make additions to these fonts, like a math addition to the Cambria font.
And I just saw your whiteboard back here. Let me see if I can zoom in on that. You got all sorts of fonts on your whiteboard. I always love seeing people's whiteboard.
Oh, Matthew Carter and H.E. Kono. Matthew Carter.
Yeah, he's really famous.
Yes,
isn't he?
yes, he's the best known probably of all the designers that we've worked with.
Yeah.
And H.E. Kono is a Japanese consultant, a liaison, and C&G, the font vendor, Japanese font vendors that we work with.
Wow.
So.
Do you have any samples of what the new fonts look like?
Oh, yeah. Well,
Are you allowed to show us Longhorn yet?
You've seen the book.
Yeah. Yeah, show us the book. So how do people get one of these books?
This is our book that we made, and you can get it free from us.
Okay.
And we.
Do you want like 3,000 emails?
And this book covers a bit about ClearType, about our reading research, about the fonts, how the fonts were made, and the interviews with the designers.
So this is one of the new Corbel.
Yeah, this is
one of the new.
Corbel.
Very nice looking font.
Yeah. And
Looks like an updated print. And
this is Canberra's website.
oh.
And this is a character set from Canberra.
So it looks nice in print too.
Yes, that was the whole purpose. The brief was to work really well for both screen and print. And with our ClearType technology background, we were able, Mike Duggan and I were able to influence the design of some of the characters that are actually seen on screen.
Well, this is a Japanese font, right?
Yeah. And we have this is the first time that you have a Japanese font that's fully scalable. There's no hand-edited bitmaps in this font. So, and we have patents on all of these fonts. So.
I find it interesting that you guys are right in the middle of the Avalon team too, which is
Yes,
can give some hints of the font technology or the type technologies that are being built in Avalon and some of the other display technologies, right?
yes. We moved from Brass's team over to Windows about 9 months ago, no, a year ago, and so it's been very cool to be here.
Yeah. Microsoft's not known for fonts or for type, is it?
We're actually known for on-screen type. We have done a lot of work on bringing TrueType to the system, and TrueType really made fonts popular throughout the world. Windows 3.1 was our first product where we really focused on fonts. But our emphasis was how can we make characters look better on the screen? And that had never been done before. And so we put a lot of effort into technologies like TrueType hinting and type design, fonts like Verdana and Georgia.
We are doing this live, right in the middle of the hallway.
Fonts like Verdana and Georgia, which were really oriented for how can we make that experience better on the screen.
Okay.
And this is kind of an extension of that, using the new ClearType technology, which gives us many more degrees of freedom in how we can express the details of the type. We can now design with that in mind. And kind of a similar analogy is that fonts often have to be redesigned when new technical mediums come out. So when a new type of printing press is designed, or you want to print on a new type of paper, newsprint, or something like that, fonts have to be redesigned to work best in that environment. So that's kind of the project we're undertaking here, to try to get very readable typefaces, to make it so it's a pleasure reading on the screen, that you're not wanting to just immediately send that document to the printer,
Right.
That you can enjoy it on the screen and it's a great reading experience.
How long does it take to design a font? Because some of us think we just go in and
Depending
play
on
with.
depending on how many characters are in the font, it can take about 3 months to 6 months.
Really?
Yeah, if you're designing the outline and then hinting it and doing all the tables work that's involved with it, there's a lot more involved with it.
4 weeks to a full. So the regular italic, bold and bold italic, and typical character sets can be upwards of 1,000 glyphs. So you're talking about 4,000 glyphs. That can take quite a bit of design work.
And do you do readability research, or
Kevin,
you can all your eyes lit up?
A researcher is yes.
Okay.
This
So-
is a design day you might be interested in actually looking at this. It's just an example of the 2-day deep dive we set up when we first initiated this project.
Okay.
So one of the things on research is that we've made these fonts, we've made new technology like ClearType, and people say it looks great, but can you quantify it? What does it mean when it looks great? So we've got a research program where we're looking into the basics of how people read on computer screens, and can we measure improvements in that. And Kevin Larson on our team, who's a cognitive psychologist with an emphasis on reading, kind of drives that program and looks into a whole bunch of different areas. So
Right.
there's Kevin.
Oh, hi, Kevin.
I just walked in.
We're talking about research on typography and how you can quantify whether a font is more readable or,
So we're taking a couple different strategies on that. The earliest work was looking at productivity advantages. So with clear type differences or font differences, do we read faster or more accurately? And with some of our bigger technologies like ClearType, there's huge productivity advantages that we can measure. Some of the more recent work, we're trying to measure aesthetic differences and the effects that aesthetics have on cognitive abilities. So it's getting at more subtle differences.
Interesting. Why is it largely seen that serif fonts are easier to read in body text? I mean, most books, most newspapers use a serif font, like a Times Roman or something like that. Why do those little things on the letter form help the readability?
The evidence for serifs helping readability is not good.
Really?
They may not help readability. There's no evidence that it hurts readability. As far as I know, it may just be a preference.
Really? So
I'm not definitive on that.
Really?
Typographers shaking their heads.
Because when I was in design school,
such a statement.
That was always just a given that it was easier to read long rivers of text that had serif fonts rather than sans serif fonts. So.
We might just be more used to it.
Really? Anyone want to argue with him?
We're always arguing with Kevin, but that's fine. I mean, I think that the interesting thing about Kevin's side, we brought Kevin into the team, and that's really been very valuable because he's trying to put some science behind it. I mean, in the past, as designers, we'd say, of course, serifs are more readable, but ask any typographer, I don't really think they all have different opinions on it. It's because it meets the eye along the top of the line, or another typographer would say because it stabilizes the baseline, or so there's various different interpretations. I don't think there's any real hard science behind it.
Well, it's great to see that we're actually studying. Are you studying with eye track research then, or?
We are doing eye track research. In fact, we're partnering with Keith Rayner at the University of Massachusetts, who is the premier investigator of eye tracking and reading.
And explain how that technology works, so people who don't know what I'm talking about.
So when you read, what your eye does is not make smooth movements along a line, but rather make saccadic jumps from word to word to word. And so we can investigate how long is it that you're going to fixate on a particular word, and how long you fixate varies based on the length of the word and the frequency that you see the word. So we measure things like how long you look at a word, how long your jump is or saccade is, and that changes on various reading factors. And so so we've discovered that, for instance, with ClearType, people read faster. And with eye tracking, we're trying to get at, do we read faster because we look at words for a shorter period of time, or because the saccade length is now able to increase, or what of these eye motor factors are driving the improvements in reading.
Interesting. I still know a lot of people who print out really long passages of text to read them on paper because they feel more comfortable. What are you finding between the state-of-the-art screens today and text? Is there a drop-off in reading speed, or because I'm sure you're doing
probably with the
like
top screens and best fonts, we're not going to be able to measure very large reading speed differences. That's not to say they don't totally exist. Paper has a lot higher resolution than screens do. But probably a bigger factor is that paper has a lot of ergonomic benefits that screens don't. With screens, you've got to look at them from a fairly upright posture. Right. You're in a fixed location, in an office chair. Glare factors may be problematic, where paper it's a lot more comfortable and easier to read on a couch.
Yeah. For the rest of you guys, when you get together with other type designers, maybe from other companies, what do you show them off in your fonts or in your type technologies that go? How do you read your fellow?
So as Greg talked about earlier, a lot of what we focus on really is the screen experience. We really want to improve how people read on the screen. Not a lot of the other companies spend a lot of time focusing on it. They generally focus on the printout. So one of the aspects of screen, making the fonts for the screen, is what we call hinting. It's some code that's written into the font that controls how each character looks on the screen, and we put a lot of effort into investigating new ways to do hinting, better ways to do it with ClearType. So that's part of the technology.
How does hinting work? I've heard that term before.
I'll let
like
Ray-
on a
I'll let
font
Ray
here.
take that one.
Well, on a font here, where would we see hinting? How would I know that a font is well hinted? In other words.
So on the screen, as Kevin mentioned, it's got quite a low resolution. So we're actually trying to essentially build up letters with pretty small dots. So previous to ClearType, we had, for instance, for a lowercase n, we had 6 just black dots to build up the letter. So what we do with hinting is we can control exactly where those pixels align to a grid, and we can make letters in the alphabet consistent with each other so that the stems are consistent. One stem isn't 2 pixels where another stem might be 1 pixel. That would be very distracting. So you'll see in some of the core fonts that we ship, like Verdana or Arial, all of the letter shapes are very consistent in weight and shape. All the X heights align perfectly, cap heights, descenders. That's all stuff that we do for specifically for the screen, and that's kind of as much as we can do to control for the screen, but it makes a huge difference. And actually spacing is another thing that we really focus a lot of effort on getting that right because we know through typography and Kevin studies that a lot of typographers will actually say that spacing is as important as letter shape, if not more important than the letter shape. So.
In Longhorn, I keep hearing the term subpixel rendering or subpixel. Can somebody explain what that is?
So the traditional spacing of fonts, we've been bound by the pixel. So everything has to start on a full pixel boundary and end on a full pixel boundary. And with ClearType, we had the ability to start on the physical subpixels that are in the display elements. But the APIs and all of the mechanisms people use to display type still is integer based, so you couldn't represent fractionally those values. So subpixel positioning is actually the full fractional representation of the characters. So a character, instead of being forced to be 6 pixels or 7 pixels wide, could be 7.2 pixels wide or 7.8 pixels wide. And what that actually means is that the bitmaps, the shapes of each individual glyph can change based on where it falls in the pattern. So you may have 3 or 6 different variants of a glyph based on where it would position on the screen. And that technology can also be done with grayscale and other technologies, but it works really well with ClearType, especially because we can keep the contrast really high, and contrast is critical for good reading on screen.
Very cool. Well, thanks for spending a little bit of time. We're going to get a tour with Bill Hill, who just came in here, and he's going to give us a tour of campus and show us all the secret hiding spots. Translation, we just wanted to get out of the office and get in this beautiful sunshine. I know. It's like, how do I arrange the sun on the days when I'm going to take a hike? Well, thanks a lot.
Right,
We're looking forward to seeing the fonts in Longhorn, and I guess people will be staring at your work for a long time, won't they?
That's what we hope.
Probably hundreds of millions of hours staring at your work.
Times New Roman and Arial, and we hope
Hopefully
it'll...
they're more than staring at it. They're possibly reading something with it.
Yeah.
Probably the ultimate compliment we can get is that people don't notice what we've done, and they can just read and be way more productive on the whole experience.
Yeah. Well, hopefully. Thank you very much.